Welcome back to After the Lights. Today's conversation is an important one, especially with World Mental Health Day coming up. We're joined by Dr. Samantha Sanderson Brown, a licensed clinical psychologist and the assistant medical director for the MLSPA. She spent years working with athletes on the mental and emotional side of performance, and today she's going to help us understand something that players do not expect when they step away from the game: grief. When the lights go out on a career, it isn't just about moving on. It's about the feeling of losing a part of yourself. And Dr. Brown is here to break down what grief is, how it shows up in our transition, why naming it matters, and how it can actually become a doorway to growth if you're willing to face it. So, Dr. Brown, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the platform for such an important topic.
Let's start with, what is grief?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a traditional kind of colloquial way of thinking about grief is we think of these 5 stages of grief, right? That's not grief, actually.
Really?
The research doesn't support a 5-stage grief model. What that was coming from some research that was done on patients who were terminally ill and how they faced the impending death that they were going to experience. And that's a really easy framework to understand. And so that got kind of generalized into grief. Overall, comes in these 5 stages. But that's actually not the case. So what we actually see in grief is a lot more dynamic and complex. Grief can show up as depression. It can show up as anxiety. It can show up as overcommitting to things to keep ourselves busy. It can show up, not that any of us can relate to that, I'm sure. It it can show up as anger. I mean, it can show up in so many different ways. And everybody's unique in how they experience their grief journey. But what we do know is that we all share it as a journey. There's not one person that I see clinically, whether it's athletically or not, that hasn't experienced some sort of loss and has grief as part of who they are and their experience.
That's interesting because I've always reverted back to the 5 stages of grief. And
hmm
anytime I feel like I'm dealing with it, I'm like, okay, where exactly am I? So thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. I think that most athletes don't realize that when they retire or step away from the game, what they're experiencing more often than not is grief. In
Right.
your perspective and in your line of work, how exactly has that shown up for players during their transition?
Yeah. So, grief, to be very concise and direct, is a response to something that we've lost. It can be a death, which is what most people think of. It can be the loss of something that we find important to us, like soccer or another sport. It can be the loss of a job. It can be loss of health. Any of those things, right, and more can really trigger this experience of almost like an identity crisis.
Yeah.
I've got this one way of thinking about myself, and now I've got to think about myself in this different way. And we talk about identity a lot, but really what we want to be thinking about is self concept. So, self concept includes identity, but it also includes our confidence, our self esteem, and then how other people see us. And so that's how I see it showing up with athletes when they're leaving sport. Who am I now? How are other people going to see me? Are they going to want to talk about what I used to do and I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about it? And so it's showing up in these ways where, we don't feel confident in what we can do next. We have no plan of what that's going to look like, but we know that putting our head down and going for it has always worked. So we're just going to do that. And then we find ourselves years down the road, not really sure why we're doing what we're doing
Ugh,
because we just go for it, right? Is
that
that resonating a little bit?
Yeah, very much so. I just, as you know, just left a very stable career and jumped into this.
Mm,
And I found myself after 4 years of hard work, ensuring that I created a stable career for my family, that I wasn't enjoying it. There were some aspects of it. The people were great. But the work in and of itself just, it didn't align with what I, perceive to be, my career path. But that, like you said, that's what we know. You don't complain. Nobody cares about your feelings. You put your head down, you
right.
work, you make it happen. So why is it important for us to call
Yeah.
this grief and acknowledge it
Right.
rather than just moving past it or starting from scratch again?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you consider grief in the context of death, when would you say to somebody, okay, move on? That person died, they're close to you, but, like, get it together and move on.
Yeah,
I
never.
feel like that sometimes when we're around people grieving, because it can be really heavy to be with somebody. We don't want them to be suffering, right? So it can feel kind of like, "Oh my gosh, move on," but we would never say that because we know that's not how it works.
Mhm.
And so if we just say, pick up and move on, start over, whatever, we're really doing a disservice to all the things that sport brings us. It brings us fulfillment, camaraderie, a sense of mastery. We really feel like agency and ability to do things and strong. We learn on a daily basis how to be flexible and how to do new things and how to fail and get back up and try again. And there's all of these things. And so if you just say move on or get over it or start over, we're really kind of saying that part of your life didn't matter. But that's a really core feature of a lot of us athletes is that, we've done this for so long, it has shaped who we are. So not only now am I experiencing potentially like a sense of crisis of who am I? What am I going to do? How do I feel about myself? What do other people see? But then we've got a message of all of that didn't even matter.
Mm, yeah.
And
I
so not calling it grief really does it a disservice.
So I went into intensive therapy when I stopped playing, but it wasn't immediately. It was a
Mhm.
couple years down the road, when everything just became too much, this
Right.
overwhelming amount of emotion. And similar to what you alluded to, it's part of the process is acknowledging it, right? Acknowledging again what you're experiencing and allowing the feelings to pass through you, which is
Right.
hard. At least for me, it was
Yes. That is
hard.
not a you issue. That is a human, unpleasant experience, I'll call
Bec
it.
well, I realized that throughout most of my playing career, certainly while I was in the MLS, I self-diagnosed myself and said I was extremely depressed. Would go to
Mhm.
training, I'd come home, I'd lock myself in the room, and I couldn't figure it out why I did that for the life of me. But again, after going through therapy and understanding how to process things and let it go, it made a world of a difference for me, and I find that I'm in a better position to manage this grief of moving on after the game now that I've gone through that. So, would you
Mhm.
recommend players go through some sort of therapy after they decide to step away?
I mean, I think some people need it, right? There are many athletes that they might grieve for a little bit of time and they incorporate what they need to incorporate and they move forward. So I don't want to paint a picture where everybody is struggling after they're done, but it is quite common.
Mhm.
And part of that is there's a component of this that I'm going to use an academic term, but it's called disenfranchised grief, which means it's not recognized by anybody else.
Yeah.
So when somebody dies, we give them a moment to grieve. We don't give them long enough, but we give them a moment to grieve. We're like, hey, you get 2 days off of work, whatever. But when it comes to sport, it's kind of like, well, you should be grateful. You got to play
Yeah.
professionally, you got to do this, you got to do that. And so you should be grateful. And so let's go on to the next chapter and it's
Right.
done, right?
Yeah.
And so even finding the space to acknowledge that it's grief can be hard.
Yeah.
And that's where therapy can be really helpful because even if you don't go in because you're grieving or you identify it as that, if you know something's going on and it just doesn't feel like you're getting your head wrapped around it, going to therapy and kind of talking it out with somebody can give you different perspectives and different ideas to try out.
Yeah.
Like, as you
Yeah.
know, therapy isn't going to solve everything. Your therapist can't do anything like for you. You have to do it,
Right.
right? But they can give you tools and be a sounding board. And so anybody who's kind of like, oh, I don't know if I should retire or what that's going to look like, or even feeling that hesitancy could benefit from, talking it through with somebody, even if it's someone just close to them that they feel they could trust.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stigma associated with therapy, especially amongst males, where and then professional athletes as well. It's like, again, I think we're indoctrinated to just get on with it and to
Yeah.
suppress emotions. So, I
Mhm.
mean, if I were to make a recommendation, I would recommend players go out and seek help because it just made a world of a difference. And
I mean, it can't hurt, right? Like,
yeah,
I think my sweeping statement is really, I don't want to set people up to think they're going to struggle. But what I can tell you is doing therapy isn't going to make it worse.
yeah, that's true. It definitely helped me. So if you feel like something's wrong, go ask for help.
Yeah, or
It's
even beforehand, if you're feeling
yeah,
anxious about it, that's a sign that you might actually have difficulty afterwards. So if you're feeling anxious about an upcoming change or you know it's coming, then be proactive
but isn't that
and go
everyone
talk to
in
somebody.
life in general? Like, how do you differentiate the two? Which is like, okay, there's a big change ahead
Mhm.
potentially, Isn't that a part of, being human?
It is part of being human that we have these big changes coming up. We might think about it. It's different to be anxious about it. So if you find yourself ruminating about it, or you can't get your mind off of it, or when you're talking to somebody you care about, it keeps coming up in conversation, that's a
Mm.
cue that it's really on your mind and you're having a hard time getting ready and processing and preparing for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, there. Because I was like, I don't think I'm ever gonna grow out of this therapy thing. Like,
No,
okay.
I appreciate that because yes, I mean, yes, absolutely, right? Like, and being anxious about it is pretty normal, right? Like,
Right,
it'd be kind of weird if you're heading into something big and you're like, that's probably not functional.
right.
But if you really are like stuck on it and not able to see a way out or what's next, that's
Mhm.
when we can start to see difficulties.
So when you say stuck on it, could it also show up as a player constantly reliving their past, watching old highlight videos, or just looking at memories and things like that? Is that technically a grief response, or again, is that
Can
complete?
be. Yeah,
Mhm.
it can be absolutely. So if you think about again, and I realize no one's dying here, but I'm using this parallel because there is a parallel here. For many of us, sport is our best friend for a very long time. It's constant. So if stuff is weird at home, if we have another trauma happen outside of sport, if we're moving a lot, that's how we make friends. Like it's our
Yeah.
mechanism for connection. And so it is a relationship in a way. And so if we think about when somebody dies and someone looks at pictures of them and someone wants to talk about them and tell stories and all this kind of stuff, it can be really healing to do that. When it's not healing, though, is how we respond to it. So if we think about like replaying in our minds or on TV, depending on how good you are, what your highlight reel is it something you look back fondly on? And is it something that's kind of like a sad but content sadness? I know that sounds weird, but it's kind of
Mhm.
like, man, that was a really good time. I've kind of understood that's over. I like to rewatch it because it's a good memory. Or am I watching it getting angry? And I'm
Mm.
thinking, oh my gosh, I should have done this. And why didn't I do that? I wish I could have played longer. And this isn't fair. And is it sparking these kind of unproductive emotions?
Yeah.
Or is it something that feels like, oh, this is really reminiscing and feels okay? So it's not on face value a bad thing. It's just paying attention to what it's doing when you're doing.
What about if you are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum where you don't want to see it? Because I didn't want to, I did not
Yeah.
want to visit a stadium for, it took me
Hmm.
2.5 years to go watch a game.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time, even to this day. I mean, I can pull up YouTube clips of me playing and I have no issues with it. It's generally when my daughter wants to see it, but I just didn't want to see it. Is that
Mhm.
also a grief response?
Oh yeah, avoidance is 100% a grief response. And I was laughing when you said that because that was my experience when I was done. And I played collegiately, but I didn't play at your level. And it was still like, I had people who I knew that professionally. And, I had people around me like, oh, don't you want to support so and so? Like, no, I don't.
Hmm.
Because I wanna be doing that. I don't
Yeah.
want them to be doing that, that's not fair. And it was just very painful. I had a lot of anger, and so avoiding it seemed like the best option, rather than understanding that my anger was covering up a lot of pain, and
Mm.
I was feeling a huge loss and a huge hole in my life that I didn't see any way to fill.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, avoidance absolutely can be a grief response. So, again, thinking about why you're doing it and how is it helpful. Now, let's say you avoid and it has no impact on your life. Like you played a sport that none of your friends watch, no one cares to watch it, and no one asks you about it, and you avoid it. That might not be functional impairment there, right? Which is where we start
Right.
to get worried because it's not getting in the way of anything. But emotionally, it still may be festering and it's
Yeah.
telling you something. Those emotions are telling you something.
Yeah. I find that for me at least, and I always go back to me because that's my only experience, but soccer
Yeah.
is unavoidable. I can't get away
Yeah.
from it. So it's opened up so many doors in my life, it becomes a topic of conversation. And I realized that if I didn't deal with it, then it was going to just
Right.
be an issue moving forward. But one of my biggest hesitancies in dealing with it or facing it is that I felt like at the time early on, I didn't have the tools to navigate
Mm-hmm.
the emotions that I was experiencing, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
is there a way for people to face it if they're not seeing a therapist and not get stuck in that space, that dark space that they might be in?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I think of though is talking about it and acknowledging it is going to help you not be stuck.
And
We get
acknowledging
stuck
it in what
because
way? This way.
even just to yourself, like, oh man, I'm really sad about this. This is
Mhm.
really hard. Like, even just saying that and knowing, like, versus like, oh, that person or this shouldn't have happened, and kind of externalizing it and
Yeah.
projecting that negative emotion onto other people. Even that will help you understand how to not get stuck because
Mm.
you're acknowledging it, and saying it's in there. And once you know it's in there, I mean, most of us have a hard time not eventually addressing it. We
Yeah.
may not do it right away, but it's
It's
there and
gonna
we
come
kind of
out.
know. Exactly. It's
It's
gonna
gonna
come
come
out.
out.
But so practically, right, there's a lot of different ways to kind of face and think about how to process grief. One of the very, very common thing that we have folks do who are grieving is to write a letter. And believe it or not, you can write a letter to anything. And you don't have to do anything with it. You can, some people will do a ritual around it where, like, they, set aside the time, make sure they have the protected space, which everybody should do. Um, and then just writing a letter around what you miss, what you're grateful for, and then what you wish could have been different. And then with that letter, again, everybody's different. I'm a keeper, so I keep letters that I write, even though it's supposed to be a release. I'm supposed to let it go, but I keep them. That's what I do. But other people may want to rip them up and throw them away. Some people may want to like put them in water and ruin it. Some people, and there's like biodegradable paper you can get that kind of
Yeah.
dissolves in water.
Yeah.
Some people will burn, right? So there's these ways in which you can start to get this stuff out. That doesn't mean that stuff is gone forever, but it's a way
Mhm.
to start acknowledging your feelings and understanding how important this piece of your life was. And then talking about it. So if you have someone that you care about and you're close to, like having conversations around, man, I'm just really missing this. This is really hard. And bolstering that support.
Mhm. So would you say if you do that, right? I have 2 questions. Do
Yeah.
that, is that a doorway for growth? Growth
Hmm.
happen within that process? And in your case, if you hold on to the paper and you happen to pick it up 6 years from now, like where does growth happen from that from that
So
experience?
it's a great question because that's actually why I keep them. Is
Mm.
because then I can look back and kind of see how I've grown in my perspective. So I don't keep them because I'm holding on to it, like, for dear life. If I lost it, it'd be fine. But being able to have somebody to look back and like, oh man, yeah, that's where I was, and here's where I am now. The growth doesn't come from getting over it. It doesn't come from getting rid of it or moving on. The growth comes from integrating it. So we think about understanding myself. I would always say I'm a soccer player, right? That was my
Right.
identity. What we wanna do is reorient where that fits. So we can't get rid of it. That is
Yeah.
part of you. That is part of your experience. It is who you are. For some people, it might get real small and you might, keep it over on the peripheral, and that's an experience you had, but it's not a core identity of who you are or part of your life now. For some people, it's gonna still be pretty central, but we're gonna integrate other things. So, like, for me, it's still pretty central, and I've integrated being a psychologist, and I've integrated being a wife, and I've integrated being a daughter and kind of understanding a more complex version of myself. That's
Mhm.
not to discount the soccer part, but it's to understand, oh, it fits into this really unique and cool
Right.
dynamic that is me.
Yeah. I'm thinking about that and I feel like if someone does not get over the negative emotions that you associate with your career, going back to me, I
Let's do
had
it.
I had such a hard time because I felt like I did not fulfill my potential. I
Yep.
felt like I had so much more to give. And like I said
Mhm.
earlier, my entire existence now stems from soccer. So many opportunities have opened up because of my playing experience. And you talk about moving it aside and figuring out how to, I guess you can say, how to frame it with how you see life now or how life is now. If you never deal with that, can you actually be okay with it though? Right? If
If
that
you
makes
never
sense?
deal with it, no. It's
Okay.
always going to be kind of a stuck point or an area where things are going to butt up against it.
Mm,
And I want to be clear, for some people, it's moving it aside. For other people, it's not. It's creating space for other things. So it's not to say you need to move it over here. It's to say, where does that fit in my life now? How does it work for me? And what are the other things I'm going to incorporate into my life and understand who I am? Because I can't be all in soccer anymore. It's
yeah,
just not possible. Right.
right.
But what you're also talking about and kind of alluded to there was this idea of grieving what could have been.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really big piece of the grieving process when people retire, especially when it's not under their own decision. Even when it is, it still can be. But
Yeah.
when it's injury related or you get cut or whatever, it's what could have been. And there can be a lot of anger with that. So there's grief on different levels that has to happen. And for that kind of stuff, yeah, therapy is really, really helpful.
Can grief be used as a framework to help understand the transition?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, understanding because when you use grief as a framework, all you're doing is understanding that this transition in my life marks a significant loss and a significant shift has to happen. And so, understanding those two pieces, I'm acknowledging a loss and I'm acknowledging the need for a shift is
Hmm.
huge in understanding. Okay, so when I'm having a hard time, oh, because I'm going through a big transition, it's because I'm being asked to be adjust things time and time again throughout the day. It's not just on this play, try this like different
Right.
move or in this tactical play, move over here. It's like you're doing that all the time and there's not a lot of direction. So
Yeah.
being able to show yourself like, okay, yes, the framework is I'm going through loss and I'm trying to figure out the shift can help just contain that emotional experience so that you can name it and know where it fits rather than, I don't know why I'm feeling so anxious. I don't know why
Hmm.
I'm so sad. I don't know, because then that just makes us feel even more of whatever we're
Right.
feeling and pissed off on top.
So, would you say that the best way to deal with grief when it comes up is, again, to acknowledge it and understand that that's what you're experiencing it, naming it, and allowing it to pass through you?
Yeah, when it's appropriate, right? Like we can't
Hmm.
always do that. But sometimes we can, right? So if I'm in the middle of a meeting and something comes up, I may hold that in
Yeah.
until later and
Right.
create a space where I need to kind of, but I may also step out of the meeting depending on
Hmm.
the situation, go to
Yeah.
the bathroom, have my moment, right? And then come out, finish what I need to do, and then talk to somebody later about
Right.
it, you know?
Right.
So yeah, you letting it happen is really important.
That was the hardest part for me, right? Like my therapist kept saying, Tristan, you're not feeling the feelings. I'm like, the hell are you talking about? I'm feeling it. This is why I'm here. I'm
Trust me,
struggling.
it's in there.
I'm feeling it. And she's like, no, you gotta. And to be fair, really, at this point, I understand conceptually, like if I'm triggered by something and I understand, okay, I'm feeling this way, but I still have my vices to help me get through that. Is there a healthy way that players can feel those emotions without spiraling into something that is unhealthy for them or addiction, or
Yeah.
what do you do? I'm still struggling with this a little bit because my
Yeah.
I go out and get an exorbitant amount of sugar and I eat like a
Yeah.
tub of ice cream. So
Listen, I don't think that's a problem because I do that too. No, I'm kidding. I think it's a really great question, right? And one of the things we have to do is be mindful of how we're introducing it, right? So if I'm flooded with an emotion, it's going to be so overwhelming that the next time it comes up, I'm not going to want to touch it,
Hmm.
right? So you have to think about, like, even when you were learning different things in soccer, right? Like you're introduced to it in increments so that developmentally you feel like you can master something before you move on. It's the same thing with emotions. You don't want to be flooded with emotion
Yeah.
and not have the tools to cope with that. So this is where therapy is really helpful, is understanding, okay, like right now you feel flooded. What did you do that was helpful? What did you do that wasn't helpful? How can we be in this together? What does that look like? You got through it, reminding you got through it. How do we make it better the next time and improve together? There's also ways in which you can kind of dose yourself. It sounds kind of, I don't
This
mean with drugs.
sounds fun.
But I mean, everybody talks about microdosing, right? You can
Yeah.
microdose emotion. So one of the interventions I'll do with folks is like, listen, if you're feeling like you're having a tough day, then I want you to set a timer for 15 minutes. And you get 15 minutes to feel however you want to feel, whatever you need to do. You got to cry, yell, scream, whatever. Be sad for yourself. I mean, I do this, right? And then that 15 minutes is done, and that's your 15 minutes.
Hmm.
And that marks the end of the time in which you're going to process that emotion right now. And then you're going to move forward with your day.
Yeah. Hey, for me, one of the anchors is always exercise. But after
Mhm.
retiring, I had a significant injury which prevented me from fully exercising, running, and stuff like that. But I can only imagine that that could also be a trigger. Like a lot of my workouts were soccer workouts, and I'd go to the gym and I'm like, why am I doing this still? Really need this. And that kind of forced me to spiral even further, which was, trying to figure out who the hell I was without the game.
Right.
How do I redefine fitness? You know,
Mhm.
um, do you have an example of an athlete who has successfully transitioned and navigated those difficult moments? What does that
Yeah.
look? So you retire. How do you go about it the right way?
I wish there was a right way, Tristan. If there was a right way, I would give you the playbook and I would make sure everybody followed it and we would all be okay. So there are people who do transition more smoothly than others. One of the things that they do is they explore areas outside of their sport while they're still playing.
Mhm.
They start to understand who they are and the different parts of themselves while they're still playing. That doesn't mean if you don't do that, then you're screwed. It just means that one of the things that can be helpful is starting to figure out who you are outside of that.
Right.
The other thing is that being gentle on yourself, which is complete opposite of sport, but understanding that you have the same skill set you've always had, but you need to use it in a different way.
Yeah.
So if we think about rest and recovery, in sport looks very different because we know we need to do it. We know when to do
Right.
it. We know how to dose it. In real life, we don't know how to do that.
No.
We're like, what do you mean rest and recover, right? I'm being lazy. I'm not doing enough,
Yes.
right? We have all of
Yeah.
these judgments.
Yeah.
And so understanding that our framework has changed. And so all of those mindsets and all of those things start to shift a little bit. And people who understand that, hey, this is going to be a little challenging, but it's a growth opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to see things in a different light and not dread it.
Yeah.
So the perspective of taking it on as a challenge and an opportunity to really flex and understand who you are versus dreading it and feeling like you have to hold on to who you used to be, I think is a huge component of um, and then you mentioned exercise. So this is something I hear so much. And one of the things that we talk about a lot with athletes is the difference between training and working out.
I don't know what to call it to this day. It feels weird just saying it's a workout. It feels like I'm supposed to train.
Mhm.
You're supposed to train, are you not?
No, you're not. You're supposed
Oh,
to train if you're training for something, right?
okay.
So if I'm training for, I know you don't like that answer, but if I'm
It's
training for a half marathon, right? I've
okay.
got a regimen, I know what's going on. When I'm working out or exercising for a body for life, what am I doing? I'm balancing cardio, I'm balancing my strength, but not because I need to perform, because I need my bones to be healthy, because I need to make sure that I'm strong enough to pick up things and move around and be functional in my day to day life. Right. So the purpose of it is completely different than training. Training is like push myself to the limit, right? And like
That's my
whatever.
kind of vibe.
And then I get to go take a nap and like sit in my cold tub and do all the things, right? But exercise and working out, like when you have your day to day job, it might be a little different for you now, but right? Like it's you don't have time to train.
Yeah.
You have time to work out or exercise, whatever you want to call it, move your body a bit, get some sweat going, and then get back to what you're
Oh,
doing.
I'm not gonna
It's
lie.
hard.
It also sounds miserable. It does. It sounds like okay, because when I hear that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you don't push it. Don't push as hard as you used to push. But
I mean,
that
you can.
feeling,
You
yeah,
can.
because I that's my baseline, and that's the thing that sucks. Like being in peak
Mhm.
performance is the baseline, and I know
Yeah.
when my body doesn't look right or I don't feel good. I don't feel as
Oh.
limber. It's so hard to go to the gym or do anything exercise related and not chase that feeling again, you know?
Yeah. Well, and so one of the things to think about, Tristan, is when we're training, we do tend to get that kind of exercise high because we're like doing it so hard, we're exhausted, but we're so fulfilled. And there's all this stuff that's great about training. I'm not saying don't ever train.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is day to day life doesn't usually allow for that. And so then a lot of people don't do anything. And then it's way worse for your health overall, right?
Yeah.
But when you think about, just moving your body physiologically, even if mentally it feels like nothing, I've really had to work on if I go for a 20-minute walk, that counts as activity.
Yeah.
Like that counts. And other people do it. I'm like, yeah, good for you. And I do it. I'm like, oh my gosh, what a loser. I can't believe I do that, But
No,
it's
I
like,
think if
no,
you
I'm
have
not.
kids,
This
you
is what it
realize
is.
that's an accomplishment. If you have kids,
Right.
yeah.
It's just like, but the 20 minutes is what I had. This is the energy I had for it. I moved my body and chose to get out and do something and not sit around and watch TV for 20 minutes. And now my
Right.
body is going to thank me for it.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different, but it's a very difficult transition.
Yeah, for sure. Now, with World Mental Health Day coming up on October 10th, what message
Yeah.
would you have for athletes, if any, if they're seeking help about grief and loss? Do you have anything that you would share with them?
Yeah. Yeah. I think most people seek help for different reasons and don't recognize the grief and losses underneath of it. So a
Hmm.
lot of times it's anxiety or I'm feeling depressed or I'm angry or irritable or something like that. And so my message to them would really be like, hey, if you're having a hard time, one, reach out for help. And if you don't know where to do that at, Psychology Today is a place. I know that there's a lot of people on there and you don't know who to see, but you're also welcome to email me seriously. Like I
Hmm.
know it's hard to navigate the mental health system. So if you don't know where to go or where to start, just start with a conversation with me and I'll help you navigate it. But reach out for that help and then consider, just start thinking about, is there a loss that I've experienced
Right.
that, or losses I've experienced that might actually be informing what I'm feeling right now?
Yeah.
And just ask yourself that question can help you see and start to identify if grief is actually part of the picture.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Dr. Brown, thank you so much. This was
Yeah,
therapeutic for me, at least,
you're
if no one
welcome. Thank you
else.
for having me.